Welcome to another deep dive. You know how this works. We take a whole bunch of sources and kind of really try to understand them. And today we're going to be looking at Bob Camblin. You sent in some really interesting stuff, like quotes directly from him.
Yeah, and like a whole biography, like really digging into his life.
Yeah. There's a lot in his life, and then this video, like a YouTube analysis of his Cantos the Third Metamorphosis.
Which I thought was fascinating.
It was really good, actually. Yeah, and then just various like reviews and forewords, of books that featured his work. So our mission today is to kind of extract the essence of who this guy was, what his like art was about, the themes, what it all meant, and really figure out this guy. Because he's described as this like mysterious, almost mystical trickster kind of figure. So yeah. Let's dive into his perspectives on art, on life, on how he thought about being creative, and hopefully by the end of this you'll have some good takeaways.
Definitely. And one of the first things that really jumps out at you when you look at all this material is just what a singular figure he was, you know? He was described as really iconoclastic, and just very, very enigmatic.
Oh,
Like you have someone who made a lot of art, a significant amount of art, but it was spread all over the place, and a lot of it is still, it's really hard to see.
right.
And yet at the same time, like you can tell from the sources that he was really, really respected by the other artists that he worked with, and collectors. They want to get their hands on his work, and
Yeah.
it's kind of this weird thing where he was both very successful and also kind of under the radar, and that just adds to that whole mystique around him.
Absolutely, and it seems like his early life played a huge role in shaping that that perspective that he developed. He was born in Oklahoma in 1928, and he started like his formal art training at the Kansas City Art Institute.
Okay.
But then he got this Fulbright scholarship to Italy, and you know, being exposed to all those like European masters, that must have been impactful. But what really stuck out in the biography was this whole thing about like him going to the Capuchin catacombs,
Oh, wow. Yeah, yeah.
with all that kind of like macabre imagery. Like, can you imagine for a young artist, like
Yeah.
going from seeing like the best of the best in terms of classical beauty, and then being confronted with like death and all that kind of stuff.
Such a contrast, right?
Yeah.
And I was thinking that that experience probably had something to do with like the themes of death and like this kind of unsettling beauty that pops up in his work later on.
Yeah.
It suggests that like he was open to experiencing all sorts of things, and that shows up in the way he expresses himself visually, not just sticking to one style or one subject. And then after his time in Europe, he started teaching.
Right.
He taught in a few different places, and then this is a big one. In 76, he just decides to like leave academia, and he becomes this nomadic artist, like really traveling and finding inspiration for his art on the road.
So there's this quote from Camblin that I think sums up his like broad perspective pretty well. He said, and I'm quoting here, "Look into the atom, you get what you need. Look into magic, and you get what you need. Philosophy and art are in both."
Hmm.
So what do you think he was getting at there? Like, it seems like he was saying there's truth to be found in both science and in the mystical, and somehow philosophy and art, they bridge the gap.
Yeah, he's definitely not saying it has to be one or the other, right? Like science or magic. It's more like he saw them as different paths, maybe to the same kind of truth.
Oh, okay.
And philosophy and art, they're like the languages that can translate between those two worlds.
I see.
And that actually connects really well with his idea of the perfectly average.
Perfectly average.
Yeah, he talked about wanting to stick with common sense and what he called perfectly average, so that he could, and this is a quote, enjoy miracles on both sides of science and magic. And he was looking for that bright gray where those two things come together. So it's not about being mediocre.
Right.
It's about this kind of balance, this sweet spot where the magic and the science can coexist.
Okay.
And I think this idea of balance, of finding that middle ground, is really important for understanding a lot of his art, especially when you see like the paradoxical way he describes it.
Right. And his artistic intentions were really interesting too. Like, he didn't just see art as, pretty pictures.
No, not at all.
He said it evolved from like art for art's sake to art for life's sake, even art for survival's sake.
Yeah. And one of the reviews you sent, it describes his drawings as these paradoxes made visible, like a trap that does not trap, or a structure that stands but does not move.
What do you make of that? Those are some pretty strange descriptions.
Well, I mean, a trap that doesn't trap, that makes you think. It's like, is it still a trap if it doesn't actually catch anything? Maybe it's meant to trap something else, like your thoughts.
Okay, yeah.
Or maybe it's meant to make you think about the nature of traps themselves, like what it means to be trapped. And then that structure that stands but does not move, that suggests something that's permanent, unchanging, but not in a physical way. Like it's standing still, but it's also kind of timeless.
Right. Yeah, I get that. Now, you also included information about Cantos third, Metamorphosis. That artwork, that grid of 12 panels, they're pretty surreal.
Oh, yeah.
But the YouTube analysis that you found, it looks at it through this Zen Buddhist lens.
Right.
And it talks about how the work is kind of meditating on the impermanence of everything, how nothing really stays the same. And when you look at all those like strange forms and the unsettling faces and stuff, it definitely makes you question your own perceptions.
Yeah, and what I found really interesting was that the analysis talked about how this kind of unsettling beauty that's in the artwork, how it's connected to this Zen idea of accepting suchness.
Suchness.
Yeah, like accepting things as they are without judging them as good or bad, pretty or ugly, just accepting the reality of them.
Right.
And it's saying that those weird forms in the artwork, they're not mistakes or imperfections, they're just reflections of how reality actually is,
Yeah.
always changing, always interconnected, always in flux.
Yeah, it makes you kind of like sit with the discomfort of it all.
Yeah.
And maybe like you discover something deeper than just like what's on the surface.
Right.
Now, the analysis went even further and connected Cantos 3 with the I Ching, specifically hexagram 18, work on what has been spoiled.
Right.
And those images of decay in the artwork, they become symbols of like corruption, imbalance, but also, importantly, the potential for change, like renewal through transformation. So each panel could be like a different stage of that process.
Absolutely.
So for someone who doesn't know anything about the I Ching, what's important about that hexagram 18 in this context?
So the main thing to know about the I Ching is that each hexagram represents a situation, and these situations, they're always changing.
Okay.
So work on what has been spoiled, that speaks to this idea that things falling apart, things being out of balance, it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's an opportunity to like roll up your sleeves and do some work. And, when you see those strange creatures and the surreal distortions in Cantos 3, they really embody that idea of transformation. Because just like, decay can actually create the conditions for new growth, these kind of unsettling images, they hint at the possibility of rebirth, of things starting over. And the YouTube analysis also brings in the Tao Te Ching,
Right.
saying that the beauty, even if it's kind of grotesque, it reflects that Taoist idea of chaos and harmony being part of the same flow.
Right, yeah, like opposites being two sides of the same coin.
Exactly.
And it all comes back to that central theme of transformation, of accepting things as they are, which the YouTube analysis really hammered home. It asks the viewer, what are you resisting? Where in your life could you use some transformation? And how can you find beauty in the imperfect?
Yeah.
And the biography mentions that metamorphosis was a big theme for Camblin in the 70s, like always representing birth, death, and then starting over again.
Right. And that theme of metamorphosis, you can also see it in his artistic journey, how his style evolved.
Yeah.
The biography talks about how he shifted from abstract expressionism to a style he called Musha Volantes in the 80s.
Okay.
And Musha Volantes, it uses these dots and dashes to create optical illusions.
Uh-huh.
And the reviews, they describe these works as shimmering, almost hallucinatory. They said he used those dots and dashes to create the sense of movement and instability, making you really question what you're seeing.
Right.
So he was constantly experimenting, not just with the style, but also with how the viewer experiences the artwork.
Yeah. And there's this whole other side to him, which is his like love of collaboration, his willingness to be anonymous.
Yeah.
Like he really valued working with other people. He formed this group called B&E Productions with Earl Staley and Joe Tate.
Yeah.
But then he even signed some of his works as just anonymous or anonymous artists. Like he didn't care about being the big name artist.
No, not at all. And there's a great quote from Penny Serling in the biography.
Yeah.
She talks about how his collaborations would lead to all these like discussions and questions, arguments, even laughter.
Yeah.
You can just picture this really lively, creative environment,
Totally.
And by choosing to be anonymous, by emphasizing the group over the individual, he was making a statement, especially in the art world, which can be so focused on the individual genius.
Right, right,
He was saying that the process, the ideas, were more important than who gets the credit.
right. And the biography says that as he went on, his work got more and more cryptic. Like there were these hidden meanings that you had to decode.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you had to know about people like Freud, de Chirico, and Grunewald to really understand it.
Right.
And then he even started putting these data problems in his drawings.
Okay.
Some of them were like codes you could solve, but others were like traps. He wanted the viewer to really work at understanding the art, maybe even like confront their own assumptions.
Oh, yeah.
And he compared it to like a treasure map hidden within the artwork.
I love that.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Because it means that looking at his art wasn't just about like passively taking it in. It was about like an active search for meaning.
Right, right.
And those traps, that adds another layer, right? Like it's like life itself. Sometimes you think you're going one way, but then it turns out to be something else entirely.
Yeah. And speaking of like layers and complexity, we have to talk about his relationship with words.
Oh, yeah.
It's kind of complicated.
It is.
The biography says he was like wary of words overshadowing the art,
Right.
Like he was thinking about that book by Tom Wolfe, The Painted Word.
Yeah, yeah.
But when he did use text in his paintings, it wasn't just like straight up information. Sometimes it was a clue, sometimes it was just a shape to look at,
Yeah, yeah.
And he's not saying words are bad. It's more like he wanted to prioritize the experience of just looking
Yeah.
rather than trying to explain everything with words.
Right, right.
So as we're kind of wrapping things up here, I'm thinking about how he lived his life,
Yeah.
Like he was a nomad. He just disappeared from the Houston art scene at some point.
Yeah, it just faded away.
And you shared this quote from him that I keep coming back to. He said, "Fortunately, some things remain forever, or another 10 years perhaps."
Mm-hmm.
What do you make of that? Like, especially given his lifestyle. What does it say about how he thought about permanence?
It's such a loaded quote, right?
It is.
Like he starts off talking about things lasting forever, and then he throws in that or another 10 years perhaps. It's almost like he's undermining the whole idea of forever.
Yeah.
And, he chose to be a nomad, to live outside the established art world. So maybe for him, permanence wasn't about like fame or recognition.
Okay.
Maybe it was about something else, something more internal, something that didn't depend on the external world.
Yeah, maybe it was just about the experience itself.
Exactly. And it makes you think, what really lasts, what's worth holding on to.
Yeah, big questions.
Two big questions.
So we've covered a lot here. Bob Camblin, he was a complex guy.
Oh, yeah.
A real thinker, an artist who wanted to challenge you, to make you think. He wasn't afraid to break the rules, to collaborate, to be anonymous, all in the pursuit of something bigger than just, creating pretty pictures.
And hopefully this deep dive has been, helpful for you. Like it's giving you a little bit of insight into this fascinating artist and his work. And, maybe it's even sparked some new ideas for you, some new ways of thinking about art or creativity or even just life in general.
Right.
Because Camblin's approach, it was all about questioning things, looking deeper, finding those connections between things that seem totally different.
Right, right.
And his willingness to kind of go against the grain, that can be inspiring for anyone, no matter what you're interested in.
Absolutely. So Camblin's story might be a bit of a mystery, but there's still so much to discover.
Yeah, there is.
We encourage you to check out the artists and the ideas that influenced him, like Zen Buddhism, the I Ching, surrealism. Maybe read some more of his quotes or look at more of his art.
Yeah, and going back to that final thought about things lasting forever, or maybe just 10 years, what do you think? What really endures in this world where everything seems so fleeting?
Yeah, that's something to chew on. So what really resonated with you during this deep dive?
Yeah, what stood out?
What questions do you still have? Let us know. We'd love to hear your thoughts.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for listening.